Morning all. Round 9 of the candidates was a particularly interesting day for me. I met with fellow friend and YouTube channel owner Chess Explained, Christoph Zlecki, a very strong international master, very experienced, and apparently with encyclopedic knowledge which even surpasses Nigel Short. So I had the pleasure of going to the venue with him, so chatting about chess all the way and about YouTube generally, and we took front row seats. I demanded to Chris we should sit in the front row to contribute to this this commentary. So we didn't go to the main hall. It's more fun in the commentary room. So Nigel Short and Lawrence Trent, really friendly guys, the commentators for the event. And during the course of the coverage of the games, there were really classic British grandmasters turning up. John Nunn, one of my favourite all-time British grandmasters. John Spillman, Matthew Sadler later. It was amazing, the people turning up there, strong grandmasters coming to comment on the games in progress. And what a set of games. I couldn't wish for more exciting games basically in this round. None of the symmetrical pawn structure kind of dry draws which sometimes occur. So the first game, Vladimir Kramnik against Magnus Carlsen, it kicked off with d4. So if Vladimir won this, he would catch up Magnus. He was a point behind. So a very important game if he could become an early real candidate for winning the candidates. If he could, well, get in the running. Because at the moment it was a two-horse race between Magnus Carlsen and Evan Aronian, both a point ahead. So Vladimir plays actually the Catalan G3. This is a Catalan system which offers a strategically rich position and is rapidly increasing in popularity. It's funny, many years ago my friend Alex Cephalontis, he's been playing the Catalan all his life, and you know it's now what all the GMs are playing as white, as well as e4. It's this fertile rich territory, unexplored. They want to gain an advantage, they want to keep the tension. So here Vladimir's chosen this system because he thinks, you know, he can get something from it, clearly. Magnus snaps up this pawn, and now knight e5. And we have a curious event here, knight c6. Black's trying to not hold on to the pawn clearly, but instead trying to get some dynamic, active counterplay. And there's an interesting choices here, knight c6 or bishop c6. But doesn't bishop c6, most of us club players would be fearful of the light square weaknesses which would result from this potential backfire. But actually it is played bishop takes c6. So what does it actually do? Why did Vladimir do this? He's fractured completely Magnus's structure. If white can start winning one of these pawns back, say this c4 pawn, the resulting structure is also potentially easy targets, right pickings. Of course, balanced against this, black's got the bishop pair and these weaknesses to play on dynamically at some point, if possible. So okay, white plays now knight takes c6, which wrenches out the dark square bishop as well, after queen e8 taking the dark square bishop. Okay, and now this pawn is immediately attacked with queen c2, and Magnus plays e5, which opens up the bishop. Of course, does white want to play d takes? Well, Vladimir actually supported the pawn with rook d1, which also seems a sensible idea. This pawn is still attacked. If bishop a6, there might be queen a4. That was mentioned in the commentary. 5.5 hours of commentary me and Chris sat through, and actually yesterday morning, to be honest, my brain was still fried from it, from the experience of 5.5 hours of detailed commentary. But that was one of the things mentioned. If this kind of queen c2 instead of queen a4 immediately is kind of sneaky. But anyway, rook b8 was played, and now we see knight c3. Should Magnus be concerned about anything in particular here? This tension is interesting, that's kept here. For the moment, Magnus keeps the tension by playing h6, And white now resolves it by playing d takes. After queen takes, it seems natural to gain a tempo and target the c7 pawn. The queen drops back. And now rook d4, and this looks pretty nasty. It's starting to look pretty nasty because white can easily double rooks on the d file. But then you might think, well, what about this diagonal? It's if there's not enough coordination, does these weaknesses actually represent something really serious for white? So Magnus plays bishop e6 here, actually, protecting the pawn instead, and we see this doubling of rooks. So, okay, decisions. What does Magnus want to do here? It looks as though, hang on a sec, couldn't he challenge the d file and white might treble? Well, Magnus's next move is actually rook b6. So he's letting white treble on this d file and dominate the d8 square with queen d2. Why? Why do this? I think these are questions for the second pass, really. So I'll put a note actually to rook b6. Why rook b6 in particular? So queen d2, this trebling, seems as though, okay, white's got a lot of positional pressure here. What is going on here? Actually, we see now king h7. Why does the king want to step out for potential checks? Potential checks, not perpetual checks. f3, rook fb8. Okay, it's revealed pressure on b2. But now Vladimir, he doesn't want to try and, that's not his idea, to try and protect b2, but actually to play queen e3 here. And this looks actually quite nasty. This pin is set up against the queen, offering b2. b2 is taken, and now rook takes c4, exploiting the pin and targeting c7. So these sliced pawns seem to be in trouble. Magnus retreats his rook, his advanced rook there to b7, humbly defending c7 for the moment. And now rook a4. And the commentators were indicating this is not the sort of position you want against Vladimir Kramnik. It seems as though, well, as well as this almighty pin here, there's the king is exposed, and you might consider things like knight e4 later, and potentially this rook could be potentially loose. In fact, after rook e8, Magnus's move, which actually could be seen as a very, very cunning move, because it's leaving deliberately a loose piece on b7, leaving a pawn hanging as well. So what is it actually doing? Well, we find out now. This is a very interesting moment, this rook e8. What is Magnus's idea here, leaving this a7 pawn hanging? It's taken by Vladimir. Take, and now a forcing move is played. Queen b4. It's not just attacking the knight. There's an entrance road here potentially to white's king via e1. Furthermore, if white plays queen d4, black has a strong reply here, c5. If he can dislodge this knight, he can get a2. If he can get a2, it's opposite colour bishops. So white particularly doesn't want to play queen takes b4 in this sort of position if that occurred. So, given queen d4 doesn't seem particularly strong, Vladimir plays bishop e5, which seems very attractive. Idea protecting knight, threatening to wreck the structure on this side of the board. But now here is a very powerful move played by Magnus. I wonder if you can guess it if I give you 10 seconds, starting from now. Okay. Visually it seems d5 is under control, but Magnus plays knight d5 anyway. A very, very naughty, cunning, tactical idea. So what's going on here? Why isn't white just winning a piece. Well, if white did take, but if he takes here, there's a check, and then there's a check here. We'll see that in more detail in the second pass. And then this bishop on e5 is loose. For example, it's not such a big deal. Or rook takes e5, protecting the queen if the queen came back. So we have here now a situation which is not so bad as earlier for Magnus. He's taken away the knights from the position. By taking away the knights, the a2 pawn's more vulnerable. We see queen takes c7. And for the moment, actually, Magnus is now 2 pawns down. 2 pawns down, but it's opposite colour bishops. And this next move attacks the queen and both of these pawns and protects the bishop. So if white takes, then it's really nothing, surely, because these 2 pawns. So white actually plays a3, and now Magnus simply plays f6. So the rook threatens to crash down to e2. White takes on c4, and we see bishop c3, and now rook takes e2, and it doesn't seem so bad now for Magnus. He's only a pawn down, his opposite coloured bishops. This is a good achievement against Vladimir Kramnik, who really desperately wanted a win. And now, look at this. It looks as though the draw chances have dramatically gone up from earlier. It seems Magnus has passed a crisis point of the game with a fantastic idea of rook e8 and knight d5. But let's carry on this game now. See what happens. Rook d4, bishop b5, bishop b4, rook e3. The opposite coloured bishops mean it's difficult for white to really make progress. In fact, this rook on the 7th is also a real pain. g4, and now bishop c6. Bishop d2, bishop f3. All of a sudden, white's pawns are really a little bit in trouble as well. Trying to hold on to all of them. But now check, and this is nasty as well. King f1, rook h2, and here the commentator's starting thinking, hold on, what's happened here? We return back to this position, and that makes it almost better. But actually, white can hold the balance here. It seems with rook d7 followed by bishop f8. But here they agree to draw. So a magnificent escape, it seems, from Magnus in this game. Let's briefly check some moments. So here it is about equal. Rook d7. If we take bishop f8, indeed, king g8, and it should be okay. It should be a draw here, and this pawn's hanging here as well. Let's undo that last bit of the game. So rook h2, the final move. So if we go back, so white had, it seems, a lot of pressure. So bishop takes c6. The engine actually likes bishop c6. Going in for this structural damage. Now queen a4 is mentioned here. And queen c2 seems quite subtle in comparison. If bishop a6, let's see, is actually queen a4 even a little bit more effective. That's a sneaky idea. Just to do this. Slight improvement or not. Maybe no big deal. So e5, okay, and we see white with this nagging Catalan advantage. So bishop f4, rook d4. So Magnus is preparing to just double on b2 with rook b6. But white's doing well here, just to play queen d2. Now king h7, very interesting move. It stays away from d8 being check, basically. If rook b8, then rook d8 is check. That's the idea of king h7. And it's one of the top moves the engine gives. King h7 here. If the queen does the check, well then there's no rook d8 again. Just go back here. Just go for the draw. But no. So and that will favour Magnus playing black. He doesn't mind a draw here. He knows it's slightly worse. So Vladimir plays f4, free here. Now after rook fb8, you might think knight a4 is a move. It looks like it might be a move actually. Knight a4. But is it a big deal? Doesn't seem that huge a deal compared to the game. The game looked promising as well. So queen e3, threatening rook c4. And black's structure is still kind of wrecked. So here we have this magic coming into the position with rook e8. I think the engine doesn't even like rook e8. It's trying to defend passively. If black starts to defend passively, black can just go downhill quite easily from here. Okay, let's say rook a8. Blimey, there's even bishop takes h6 here apparently for rook h4. This is quite dangerous. I think this was actually shown in the discussion room, this kind of position. Look at this, knight e4 plus 3. Magnus avoided getting slaughtered with the black pieces, where a lot of us would have been slaughtered basically. If queen g7 here, we can take and check, and we have a loose piece alert and a double attack, subject of previous videos on this channel. Loose piece on b7. So this shows some of the dangers of black's position. If he plays rook a8 trying to defend, bishop takes h6 actually seems like a crushing tactic here. So we see rook e8 offering the a7 pawn, and we see this queen b4, and look, the engine thinks white's better by a lot, but now it's coming downhill. Queen d4 it's not impressed with because of c5. The engine cries, so it's going to bishop e5 now, but bishop e5 offers this resource, this knight d5 resource. What a pain. It's not just the knight on c3, it's the e1 square black's trying to get access to. You might think, can white do anything tricky here to avoid this? What about a3? Queen b3. And that's horrible on the rook on d1. So we can't get rid of this annoyance on e1. So in the game we saw knight takes d5. Well, what else? If knight e4, that seems actually initially plausible. Bishop f5 here, and there's still this e1 idea, which I think would secure a draw here. Bishop takes e4, queen takes e2, queen takes e4. We got a perpetual check, or at least this tactic again. Rook takes e5. This loose bishop on e5 via the e1 square forms a great tactical basis for a lot of combinations here in this position. What a pain for white. What a disappointment for Vladimir. He talked in the press conference about being a millimetre away from having a completely crushing winning position, but this knight d5 really does seem to hold the balance, unfortunately, for him. So if it's taken here, if the bishop's taken here, check, then check here, and e5 is loose again for rook takes e5. Absolute genius to really equalise black from a very, very tricky position, on the brink of a tricky position. The genius is rook e8 supporting knight d5, because that really crashes through all the way down e5. With the e5 bishop loose. Okay, so knight d5 here seemed to resolve a lot of a lot of black's issues. Even though 2 pawns down in this position, queen c4 is guaranteeing getting a pawn back, it seems. And now the engine's not impressed by this position. It looks virtually it's level again. It's drawn. So a fantastically resourceful draw from Magnus. Okay, brilliant. So Magnus pleased to draw with black, surely, against Vladimir Kramnik. Let's go on to the next game. Boris Gelfand against Levon Aronian. Boris on a high from the day before, from winning from the day before against Rajabov, Timur Rajabov, plays d4 against Levon, and Levon plays this system here, and we have knight f3 and now d5. So a queen's gambit declined, but with bishop f4, which apparently Colin Crouch has written a book on, bishop f4 being a strong move, better than bishop g5 in some respects. So what's the key difference? A bishop on f4 rather than g5. Okay, well, let's see this game as an example. After castles e3, it looks fairly solid for white. Knight bd7, bishop e2. Black plays c6 now. Levon. And I had suggested that this kind of stabilises d5, so Levon might be playing knight h5. I suggested that to Nigel Short and Lawrence Trent, and indeed this turns up on the board, knight h5. White did have a chance if he wanted to preserve the bishop here. He can of course play h3. Okay, but no. So we see bishop e5, f6, bishop g3, but now the idea is not to take on g3. The idea is to get a kind of improved version of the Dutch stone wall. In the Dutch stone wall, black's often being tortured on the dark squares, but here black can get rid of this dark square bishop, leaving his own dark square bishop without a partner in white's position, without a equivalent player in white's position. So bishop e5, knight hf6, h3, as though the bishop might want to sneak back and avoid being taken, but it's taken now. Knight takes e5, and the general consensus was, at this moment, Levon has achieved a favourable version of the Dutch stone wall. I did want to point out actually that as a junior, Nigel Short was recommending this Dutch stone wall as a fun opening for us juniors, but I didn't. So he'd also suffered some losses actually in very high level tournaments, like to Kasparov. There was one game against Nigel Short in a Dutch stone wall. But anyway, this is different for a normal Dutch stone wall. Often white's playing plans like b3 and getting rid of this bishop, and then the e5 square is even worse, much worse than this. This seems greatly favourable by comparison. So f4, and we have knight takes e5, f takes, bishop g5, and this bishop's already looking a bit nasty. But there's a plan available for white here to cut off this bishop from being such a nuisance. If white can arrange it, a knight coming to f4 later is a key plan here. We see bishop d7. The bishop might want to wriggle out of the pawn chain to stop being a bad bishop behind its own pawns. Rook c1, rook c8, a3. There's suggestions of c5 just immediately, but okay, this keeps the tension in that centre. But it's giving black the opportunity for things like d takes, which could be nasty under certain scenarios. Bishop e8, and in fact here bishop d3 seems a little bit fragile, potentially for d takes c4 and a move like c5, because there's pins around the place. Like d2 is not protected, the queen on d2 is not protected. But here we don't see d takes c4 or ideas like that. We see rook c7 just calmly trying to maybe encourage white to play c takes. But white doesn't. White refuses to play c takes. White just plays knight e2. John Spillman said several times, why doesn't white just want to play c takes d, just to make sure he's not losing a pawn here at any point, or encouraging black to play something tactical. But no, we have this position where the tension's kept with these two pawns. Bishop h5, knight f4. This plan has been achieved, it seems. But now Levon gives up that dark square bishop, at the same time undoubling white's pawns. So what is this? Allowing white to undouble the pawns, giving up the dark square bishop. Well, this bishop is eyeing d1 here, and in relation to d4, if black can take and play rook d7, if this wasn't dropping, this would be such a good idea. This would be a backward pawn, semi-open file from black's point of view. Levon actually just plays rook d7. He's still permitting white to potentially play c5, but closing up the position would give black a free hand, surely, on the king side, and that's what Levon would love. Surely he can start doubling and play like Tau over there, try and slaughter white's king. So maybe that's the idea, to allow white to play c5, and then there's not really many targets of attack on the queen side, and black would have the free hand on the king side. But no, Boris Gelfand plays queen e3 here, and this is really naughty tactically in some respects. I say that because there's a slightly loose piece here. After the very, very tempting d takes c4, bishop takes, there's a backward pawn on the d file. So first question is, why I suggested the passive bishop f7. I mean, Nigel just saying rook e8, this bishop's kind of passive. It's eyeing d1 here, why take it away from h5? So just rook e8 maybe, and then this backward pawn surely is an issue. It justifies this bishop on h5 eyeing d1. This is a backward pawn and semi-open file which has been doubled against, and I just thought, in this position, surely Levon's getting the upper hand here. In this position though, Levon seems to take a reasonable move, tactically justified in the position. He doesn't want to defend e6 at all, either by my passive suggestion of bishop f7 or rook e8, Nigel Short's suggestion. He doesn't protect e6 at all. He just plays rook takes d4. And what do we have here? A slightly loose rook, slightly loose, is only protected by the queen. Slight responsibility for the queen. Boris just takes on e6. And here is the cunning idea that Levon has. It's revealed in this position. Levon's cunning idea in this position is to play bishop f7, which would leave him, if white took, with control of the d file, with great opportunities, maybe, if white takes. And surely not taking this pawn, surely that just tactically failed, that can be ruled out. So let's imagine if takes here, okay, white's for the moment got this passed pawn, but black can also, potentially treble and really control that d file and have a very pleasant position. Okay, unfortunately, and this is heart-wrenching, actually, but white plays bishop takes f5. Heart-wrenching for Levon fans, but it's now apparent that actually there's something there must be something slightly wrong with bishop c4. Why doesn't this just win immediately in exchange? It's attacking the rook and it's attacking the bishop. This is a good puzzle position. Why do you think there's a flaw in this thing, in this resource bishop c4? There's a flaw, and it is related in some way to this slightly loose rook on d4. Can you see what white plays in this position? If I give you 10 seconds, starting from now. Okay, e6, and I just couldn't believe it. I was actually gutted for Levon Aronian. He seemed to achieve a favourable version of the Dutch Stonewall, which is an opening I quite love using in chess cube war zones. And he paradoxically gave up his dark square bishop to achieve some sort of d-file advantage, and the whole thing was kind of made use of for this loose piece scenario. It comes down to a loose piece on d4, heart-wrenching stuff. because if rook takes f5 here, e7, this loose rook is really loose, just undermining the defender. No way to stop the queen without losing material. So from a great position, now black is struggling. White's just snatched a pawn. And furthermore, this bishop cannot be taken. White now plays simply rook fe1. If the bishop is taken e7 again and is crashing through on e8, this is unpleasant, to say the least. Maybe we should check that a little bit in the second pass, but it's very unpleasant to allow e7. Oh dear. For example, I think there's only is actually a move, bishop here, or is this running into big trouble? I think e8 seems fairly logical. This is definitely something to check in the second pass, bishop f7. I'm noticing that now, and I wonder, should I say anything now? In the game, rook takes f5 wasn't played. Possibly there's actually a stronger resource here on rook takes f5. I wonder if indeed it might not even. No. Let's just check this. Let's just check this. e7's not the idea here. Pardon me. I'm going to check it now. Rook takes c4, leaving e7 absolutely crushing here. There's no bishop f7. Then I did a quick check here before carrying on with nonsense. Okay. So rook takes c4, not e7. That makes e7 a lot more effective without bishop f7 as a resource. So rook fe1. Okay, so that's why the bishop is immune here. This is really nasty stuff now. So rook e8, white's in the driving seat, e7. Bishop f7 here. Rook c5. So white can now enjoy his extra pawn in this position. Okay, h5. And the bishop doesn't even retreat here. Now another tactical blow is played by Boris Gelfand. Can you see what Boris plays here if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, he plays f5. He's going straight into black's king position, potentially. It's really quite dangerous to take this bishop, because then after a check, fg, there's rook g5s. Okay, so king g7 is played, and now black's pawns are weak over here. Fg takes it, now winning another pawn, 2 pawns up. Ouch. The pain increases. Rook d3, check, the queen's come off. So 2 pawns up here, with an immediate threat of, for example, rook g5. Looks quite tasty. So this is taken, rook takes h5, but now 1 pawn up, but this is what a pawn. And this pawn's holding up for the moment, these 3 over here. Rook f5. Rook d3, rook e4, rook d7, check, check, check. Now the rook's double over here. We see check, and I thought, king f2 to avoid any kind of cheapos. There's a cunning cheapo, it seems, that's played in this position. Rook f1 to get rid of one of the rooks forcibly, using this king's always attacking a rook here if the checks continue. Even if the check's over here, king e6, there'll be a rook. Well, no, the king reverberates here. Let's see, check, check. Now, if check here, it can still go like this to keep a rook being attacked. So it's a neat tactical idea. Does it save Levon. Not really. Here, now, in this position, White's got H pawn plan. It plays H4. It's going to queen his H pawn, potentially. King E6, Rook G4, King F5, King G3, Rook E1, check. Now H5, this dreadful H pawn. Levon is able to equalise now on pawns, which seems like a good thing. But the king's cut off from the H pawn. This H pawn's really quite dangerous now. Unstoppable, actually. King H4, and quicker than Black's able to create a pass pawn over here by far. Also, a bridge building exercise is possible as well if needed to stop the rook on H1. So B6, H6, check. Okay. And now we see King E6, and this looks absolutely losing for Black now after King G6. Okay, because White doesn't have to have the bridge on H4, he can have it on another square potentially, or, well, King E5 allows the bridge on H5, check. But Black resigned here. Let's just see this position. What's going on here? So if King E6, actually, is Rook H5 not that good? No, it's not good at all. The Black's king getting in. G4 is the way to do it for Rook H5 to be a lot more effective and winning. G4. And here, okay, so now threatened with, Rook H5 surely is the move now, and this kind of thing is unstoppable, and that's easy win for White. So, okay, the bridge on H5 with the pawn on G4 is particularly a nuisance here. If Black had played, well, what can Black actually play in this position? What is White actually threatening? King G6 and G4, just to carry on with this pawn. Alright, let's go back anyway and track this game. So I felt for Levon, it seemed he had a favourable version at one point of the Dutch stone wall, and he had this interesting plan of on the d file, this kind of loose pawn on d file, or a free hand on the king side, to be emerging from this stuff, from this cunning idea, leaving this bishop just usefully, it seemed, controlling d1. But no, White never played c5. White just played queen e3. So after d takes, the engine's immediately giving rook e8 here, or my move bishop f7, Nigel Short's move rook e8. And should Black be better here? Should Black be better? Actually, there's a resource, it seems, which is quite nasty. I think this was pointed out by Nigel Short, d5. Because we have a skewer here of the two rooks, and on e takes, bishop d3, d4, and I think Nigel Short stopped analysing here, thinking this is no good. But actually, how does Black defend f5? Let's say rook f8. The engine likes White here. We've got this dangerous pass pawn. This pawn is blockaded, and actually White has b5. And this is really quite interesting, this position. An interesting position where Black is a pawn up, but White has a lot of pressure compensation. Maybe it is about equal. Okay, so anyway, d5 is actually possible after rook e8. Otherwise, what else does white actually do? You know, with black controlling d1, I think d5 might not just be possible, it might be the only move actually. d5 might actually be the only or the strongest move in this position, believe it or not. Does get that pass pawn protected. So anyway, we see the continuation here of rook takes d4, and yes, the evaluation's gone up. Bishop f7 is not mentioned by the engines because the engine will see in a split millisecond bishop takes f5. There's a big advantage for white now. Ouch. This just doesn't work. This bishop c4 doesn't work here. Not for the most obvious reasons of e7 immediately here, but rook takes c4. Sorry, e7 immediately there is on the queen. Pardon me. In this position, e6 we saw queen d6. Okay. And here, in this position, it seems e7 can be answered by rook e8, but in the game we saw rook fe1. Now in this position, pardon me, rook takes f5, not e7, because there's the amazing resource bishop f7, and that's actually okay for black. No, in this position, we knock out completely, stamp out bishop f7 as a resource. We take that bishop. And now we play e7. That's all over with that pawn again. Unfortunate. Well, tactics to the rescue of white's position totally to be a pawn up. And again, tactically, we get another tactical hammer blow coming up. So rook c5, not only for rook e5, but being able to switch across the whole fifth rank here is very, very useful. Maybe Levon's annoyed. He's not playing the strongest move. It's a loosening move, h5. He's clearly annoyed. You know, rook d3. Okay, but then what is he looking forward to here? It's miserable. If his rook ever takes on here, there's bishop d7. He's got a miserable position here. But it's minimizing the damage. But no, he goes for h5. If the bishop did retreat, what's the idea? If the bishop did retreat, he can simply take the pawn. But he's created weaknesses still. Rook e5 here. This is dangerous. White can get this pawn. It's still not even convincing. On queen takes f4, takes b5. This is still good for white. It's all good for white basically, but f5 is another hammer blow to black's position. We see this +3 now. So if this had been taken, we have the check, fg, threatening to mate black now. If queen g6, we win the queen. If bishop g6, rook g5. How does black defend? If king tries to play like this, an overloaded king now, it seems, because the check here, queen's dropping off. Ouch. So unfortunately, it's really gone downhill in this position after f5. So Levon's king g7 loses basically a second pawn. So I found the game heart-wrenching. And I'm not even really a great fan of Levon Aronian usually, but he just had a good position in the Dutch Stonewall, an improved Dutch Stonewall, and that's why I felt, you know, wasn't he at some point having deserved to have a better result than this? Important note, actually, just editing this video before going out finally. There's actually, it's more than just the 2 pawns, as I've noted. Is the king safety is really damaged here. In the game, Levon Aronian played rook d3. If he plays rook e4, we see that king safety is a major issue here. Check, for example, and if queen d4, which is given as the best move, we have rook g5 here. And this is a better continuation than the game. It seems, you know, black's in real trouble. So, say for example he did this, we could liquidate, and it's just a much easier win than the game continuation. Okay, but there's also in the actual game continuation, we saw here bishop takes h5, and I mentioned winning a second pawn. But here, rook d3, there's actually a very strong move. Instead of the check here, which was played, we have queen g5. This is actually the most powerful move. So there's major issues here. White is threatening, for example, rook c e5, and then maybe rook e6 is on the cards. So this is really quite dangerous. Or rook f5. It's for rook. There's numerous threats here. For example, queen f6. We can even play rook f5 here and get the situation again where that bishop is pinned. And this is much more simple than the game continuation. So that was an important note to make, I think. If say a5 instead, just to show king safety, rook c e5 threatens. I think rook e6 is the key threat here, so king safety is really quite damaged. If rook d5, we can take this, take here, and win another pawn, and that's pretty terrible. So important note about this game, this rook d3, yeah, a slight inaccuracy with queen e5 check, but still white clearly better. But queen g5 here is actually a much more crushing, incisive move in this position. So queen g5. But you know, that's the brutal reality of chess. You know, these tactics can, and that's good for people in inferior positions. You know, if you can find drum up, if you can see all your tactical resources at your disposal, it's actually quite tricky, even someone in a favourable position, to just gradually, you know, crush you. And that's the beauty of chess, the resourcefulness of chess. Okay, so here it's an interesting conversion. So white's just 1 pawn up, but it's a very advanced pawn, and the king's slightly in trouble for a moment. It allows white's rooks to really secure that pawn. So if white's given enough time, he's just going to make advances. Wasn't king f2 better? The engine actually prefers king f2. It avoids this kind of rook f1 resource. If we have this position, then okay, the king can start marching up, it seems, all the way. That would be really good, apparently. So that looks okay. But no, we actually see king h2, allowing this rook f1. And now my engine is packed up on me, so I'm just gonna go through the rest of the game. So, but even this, it's still winning for white. It's winning because this h pawn is so dangerous now. The bridge building, not letting black king in the corner with a silly rook exchange, but actually playing for a construction like this is much more effective for h7. Okay. This doesn't happen in the game. The game was resigned around about here. Okay, so unfortunate for Levon, and well done, you know, to Boris Gelfand. 2 wins in a row. He must be on an absolute high now. Okay, moving on to Peter Vidler against Grischuk. Oh wow, what a game! Peter Vidler played d4. Zvilla on the Roof, as he's sometimes nicknamed after that classic film. So c4, g6, we see Grischuk playing actually the King's Indian defence, and we see the move f3 after Frederick Simish, who had this reputation of sometimes not being the best with his clock. In one tournament apparently he lost all of his games on time. I knew that before Nigel Short had told that story. I knew that. That is one little bit of trivia that fascinated me. So Simish move f3. We see after castles bishop e3. Now c5, offering this dangerous gambit. But White doesn't have to accept the gambit going to that theoretical debate. Peter Zvilla just plays knight ge2, and now again the gambit is invited. White rejects it with d5. We see knight e5, hitting c4, that's protected, knight g3. Slight downside of knight g3, it can be a target, so h5 and h4. h5, downsides to this though, you know, some weakened squares, but it gets White a little bit tangled in development, and we see actually after bishop e2, h4, knight f1. Okay, White's got more control of the g5 without any annoying h6. But what about the development over here? It's a bit tangled. And Alexander plays now e6. And we see f4 kicking the knight. And I think one idea might actually be knight fg4. Should I dare put a reference check on this position? We'll wait maybe for the second pass. But in the game we see another interesting alternative in this position being played out. And as a King's Indian fan, of course, this is really, really an interesting game for me to watch at the time. So Black in this position, if he doesn't want to go to d7, you know, taking, and then we lose d6, he actually takes on c4, giving up the knight. For what, you might ask? Wow. Okay, well, after bishop takes c4, not touching these two pawns just yet with anything, but actually Black now plays b5. Wow. Okay, what is going on here? Is White's centre exploding, for example? After knight takes b5, knight takes e4 might be tempting. Or is there other stuff going on? Maybe ed and then knight g4. There's a lot of stuff happening here with the White king still in the centre, interrupted from casting with this knight. There's some things to punish, potentially, from Black's point of view, but he hasn't invested a whole piece here. So this is really a complicated position, it seems. Peter Zvilla decides to take with his bishop, and we see e takes d5, and now not maybe wanting to expose his king potentially to rook e8, but at the moment rook e8 is controlled by that bishop. So there's other ideas as well. There's knight g4s to consider, but Peter Zvilla plays actually e5 here. He wants to get an attack on d5. He wants to dislodge this knight away from d5 and maybe attack this rook and stuff like that. And here the game really goes off the rails crazy. Black takes, f takes, and instead of moving the knight, well, to be fair, you know, if knight g4, that's not as bad as it would have been, because there's a knight here holding e3, so maybe taking on d5 might be possible. Black plays bishop g4 instead, and I think we now reached the point where Alexander Grischuk's preparation ended apparently here. Now White played a very practical move here with his queen attacked. I wonder if you can spot what White played here if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, now if you move the queen, I think among other things there might be resources like d4, and you know, with the white king still in the centre, that might be quite unpleasant. White played a practical move. E takes f6. He's getting a lot for his queen. Black plays bishop takes d1, taking the queen. F takes g7, attacking the rook. King takes here. And now, another great move, it seems, a surprising, shocking move, is played in this position. What would you play here? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Bishop takes c5. Knocking out black's pawns. The bishop would seem absolutely beautiful, unchallenged on the dark squares here. White's got a lot of material for the queen. So black has some serious issues to address here. Actually, if the bishop just goes back, for example, to h5, then we can imagine check, knight e3, and that's very, very pleasant for white. This bishop eyeing this diagonal, and black's king has some great issues as well, potentially. But there's a resource here which keeps black in the game. I think Peter Zvilla himself thought this was going to be brilliant for him if the bishop retreated back, but unfortunately this next resource from black is very, very powerful. Can you actually guess what black plays in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, h3. Not moving the bishop, not moving this either. It doesn't mind getting this dark square bishop. Threatening hg. So this can lead to some major problems for white now. After g3, bishop f3, for example, which we'll check in the second pass. I think this is a highly tactical position, but white just plays now rook takes d1. After hg, he next just to lose this knight on f1 with check. King takes f1. So we have an unbalanced position, 3 pieces for the queen. But can white coordinate the pieces? Can this bishop be very useful on this diagonal? We see queen h4, and here is an opportunity to slip in bishop d4 check. Seems quite natural. But actually now we see instead rook g2. Okay, and black now moves the rook, and again it would seem bishop d4 might be quite tempting, but Peter plays with his rook to d4 instead. These are things to really, I think, explore with engine territory now. We're in a very, very tactical position. Rook d4 attacking the queen, queen h5, rook f4. So with the rook here it's much more aggressive than just protecting the bishop, say, from d1, and the bishop ideally going to d4 now. But this plan is rudely interrupted now by Alexander Grischuk. This would be a beautiful, beautiful bishop on d4, and for me, watching these games in the commentary room, this is another, for me, slightly heart-wrenching situation where white's queen sacrifice, glorious queen sacrifice concept, the sting is taken out of it, really, because black now forcibly sacks the exchange, getting rid of this beautiful dark square bishop. d4, exchange sack. After bishop takes, just snapping it off. And this leaves white now with some coordination issues. Even though technically material up, it's kind of tricky now to coordinate, and black's king safety has just gone up a lot without this dark square bishop poking into these dark square weaknesses. So let's say rook b8, a4, a6. That's taken. Check, check, check. And it doesn't seem that easy for white to win this position. At least from my kind of perspective. Watching, I thought it could be a little bit tricky here. This rampant queen is quite a danger. Queen c1, king d3, rook b6. And there's numerous checking opportunities. Check, rook d7. But another element enters the position now. After rook f4, another element unveils itself. Black plays f5. This f pawn is a real menace potentially if left unchecked, unblockaded. After rook d4, we do have at the moment more potential for this f pawn to start running soon. King h6, h4 is played, rook c7, bishop c4 shielding the knight, check, and then we see with that queen on f1 the f pawn can be herded forward after f4, and it's now really quite dangerous. And in fact, white's next move, well, white is really in a lot of technical issues here. He plays king c2, and unfortunately for white, f3 is starting to win back some material, and here a draw offer is made cunningly. So maybe exploiting some potential annoyance that actually this isn't an ideal conversion of this extra material against the queen, and Peter Zvidler actually accepted the draw here. So why is he losing material? Yeah, this game is one for engines, really. This is a huge territory of technical resources, really. Why is he losing material? Let's answer this question first. If rook e4 in the final position, which they agree to draw, check, f2 is winning material here, with rook takes c4, taking away protection of f1, then f1. And we have this position where both Nigel Shaw and Lawrence Trent, even if this position was arrived at, that white shouldn't be able to lose this, and white's got the winning prospects. The engine is actually giving 0.00. I think there's just enough checks. My intuition, for what it's worth, was telling me that. I thought, well, Peter Zvidler probably recognises it's a perpetual sort of check situation. Why not save his energy and go home early and get a better night's rest for preparation the next day, even if there isn't a game the next day, which there wasn't. But yeah, so maybe that was a good time to agree a draw. I don't think he's missed out on anything particular here. Just lots of checks, endless checks. I think the opportunity's gone here. It looks as though, from an engine point of view anyway, technically it's equal at this depth. So let's go back. Crazy stuff in the opening. Now, as black, I'm a really fond exponent of this myself in Blitz, this system, this gambit. But it's avoided here, and white's carefully trying to kick the knight with f4 soon. If white can get in bishop e2 and f4, white will be laughing. Okay, so black's interrupting the plans here with h5, and we see h4, e6. Now f4, I'd like to do a theoretical check here, so I'm going to stick on the reference check on this position. There's actually 4 games found here with knight g4. Knight g4, the move given, and the engine knight's knight g4. So let's have a quick look at knight g4. There's a Chris Ward game with knight g4, I think. Let's have a quick look against Yi Jing Xuan, 25-10. That was played in London 1997. Chris Ward was 24-90. So GM Chris Ward. So he took here f5, knight d5, and black took on f5 now. He takes. White castled, queenside, a crazy position. Queen f4. And it looks a little bit dangerous actually for black, this kind of situation. f6. Wow. Queen takes h4. Chris, this is one of Chris's more dynamic games, I think. A lot of his games are very exciting. But yeah, he eventually won this one from this position at move 56. Very exciting play from that opening. But yeah, the move usually, I think, is this knight g4. Szabo. Oh, we got Hofmüller against Szabo as well, which ended in a win for white. We've got Ganina against Girugia in 2008, which was a win for black. With all this knight g4 stuff. So here is a little bit of a surprise. This knight takes c4. It's certainly shocked all of us watching the game live in the commentary room. This concept b5 now. So what is actually going on here? If knight takes b5, is it knight takes e4? Is it ed? Well, the engine at this depth is giving e takes d5. So if bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes, check. And if knight c3, not actually bishop c3, but even stronger, well, moving the rook out of the way and threatening rook b2, e5, rook takes b2, now threatening queen takes c3, bishop d2, d takes, knight d1. And apparently black's getting a better position out of this. This is just a quick check of what's going on. So if we have a position like this, black's doing well. I know it's a long tactical line there with knight takes b5. So let's just review that again. Taking on d5. Now, is knight takes e4 at all playable? Can we reject that outright? Apparently, we can almost reject this outright because queen d3 is strong here. Bishop takes, queen takes, check. This is untangling anyway. Queen c4. Can't be that bad for white here. So I suspect the stronger continuation theoretically. Well, after this bishop takes b5, is e takes d5, even though it's a light depth. Sorry, after knight takes b5, our investigation was e takes d5. And now if e5 here, d takes, knight takes, knight g4, knight takes, queen takes, h3, white. If this would help white untangle to take on e3, so taking here instead. This is crazy stuff. F takes, bishop takes. It's chaos. But this extra knight, is it that great? This extra knight. It's fun for black to play here, I would say. That's my evaluation. Fun for black to play. So b5, we saw it in the game, not knight takes b5, but bishop takes b5. And again, e takes d5 was chosen. Okay, so e takes d5. But now e5, which looks like a nice move. Okay, so black in the game played d takes e5, and if he played d4, what's going on there? E takes, bishop takes. Well, that's knight d5. And I don't know, we can slip in h3. g3, bishop b7, weakening that diagonal h3. And black looks okay here. In this chaotic position, apparently, is okay. So this does seem to generate counterplay even with d4. It seems there's counterplay there. But d takes e5 was played. F takes. And again, black might try d4 here. Unless this runs into something horrible. Bishop g5. h3 again. This diagonal, it's a very useful resource. h3. White has to play the curious knight e3. If takes here, then apparently black's doing okay. It's murky positions with the king in the center. So anyway, in this position, black didn't play d4. Black played bishop g4. Whoa. What? Now queen a4 is given us at this depth quite a big evaluation shift, and now it's coming down about queen a4. But the move played looked just stunning. This queen sack, it looked like a great idea in the follow up. So e takes f6, f takes g7. So king g7, if rook e8, I guess we just take that rook or something. We can take that rook, and we can take on f7, and this starts to be very nice for white, one would think. Okay. So king takes g7. Bishop takes c5, best move, because otherwise d4. So this breaks black's strong pawns in the center. If rook takes d1, d4, and that's not so bad, it's actually better for black. So, without checking further, but bishop takes c5, really nice practical move. Powerful bishop, this bishop's worth a lot with these weakened dark squares around black's king. So if bishop h5, is white going to be significantly better? I would assume so. Check. Although the engine doesn't think so, it's giving move king h6. If king h7 is an example, knight e3, white's position looks rock solid now and coordinated. Is it so clear, this position with the queen sack? Apparently not. Apparently there's no big advantage here, it's just another position. But surely it would grow here an advantage, because white's coordination is huge. This bishop looks absolutely amazing. I think it's easier for white to play. Look at these glaring dark square issues. Mind you, black's got this g2 square. Okay, I think it's easier to play for white, and that would be much preferred to the game continuation. In the game continuation, we saw h3, so that seems to be a very powerful idea here. Okay, so rook takes d2 hg, and the game continues like this. Crazy stuff. Queen h4. What is actually the major threat? Is this queen f4, rook ab8, or queen takes h2? Queen f4 is actually the more significant threat here. Okay, so rook g2, and we see rook fd8. Check is not played here. The engine's liking bishop d4 check. If this had been played, what is actually the issue here? This looks as though it's interesting. Even to sack a pawn, it looks interesting. To try and deliver mate on h8, for example. This is why I was slightly gutted. The loss of that dark square bishop, white seemed to lose quite a lot of dynamic potential from his position, and that is what gutted me. The loss of that beautiful dynamic potential that could have been present with that bishop just sitting on d4. So if that was a missed opportunity, it's a bit sad that here, instead of bishop d4, rook d4, as though he could play bishop d4 later. So this looks really, really interesting. So rook g3. I guess maybe Peter's wondering, I don't know about this sort of stuff with E1. Looks, if rook D3, I think we've got an issue with E1. Which is F6. Okay, F6. If we haven't got access to E8 anyway, that can just be taken. White really would be absolutely fantastic here, surely, after knight takes D5. So rook D6, knight E2, and again this looks interesting as well, with this bishop on D4. So if I don't know, this is very, very dynamic stuff, of course, from the engine's point of view. That in this position, bishop D4 check, just to sacrifice the pawn with rook G3, is really dangerous. But white does want to coordinate rooks and try and get down this H file to make use of this bishop. If the pawn isn't taken, if F6 instead, blunting the bishop, king G2, and again, you know, with the bishop on D4, you'd think white has great dynamic potential, and it looks quite favourable for white. I think that's an improvement over the game. So something quite upsetting, at least for me, happened during the game, that black was able to counter-sack the exchange now. If white gets in bishop D4, he'll be laughing. He'll have great play for great number of pieces for the queen, fantastic pieces. But alas, this D4 counter-sacrifice of the exchange knocks out white's coordination significantly, makes it a very difficult position, I thought, to play. I would have great difficulty playing this position as white, other than like you guys on YouTube, but it's hard, you know, with all these checks around. But this resource, which is at the moment seems a bit under fire, is actually an important resource for dragging down the board in time pressure situation. As the game showed, a very, very important resource for black, not just the rook and queen, but this F pawn, which secured a draw here, a timely draw offer, I think around about here. Okay, great place to offer a draw. Right, let's go on to the next game. Very, very exciting game. I was enthralled by that one as well. So, Ivanchuk against Rajabov. Okay, Vasily played. Let's try and get the board the right size again. Oh dear. Window, standard layout. Okay. Pardon me. Okay, I'll try and get the board rearranged. Okay, Ivanchuk against Rajabov. So Vasily playing a solid opening, knight f3, d5. We have a queen's gambit declined. So bishop h4. And now this knight e4, apparently it's a Tartko system. Not Tartko, Lasker has played this. I thought I associated knight e4 myself with a kind of Capablanca freeing move. I thought it was called a Capablanca freeing move. Maybe Capablanca has adopted it a lot as well in some sort of position. I'm not sure if h6 or not. Now, Chess Explained is like encyclopedic knowledge on this, more than Nigel Short, teaching Nigel Short at this point about this opening. White does seem to be quite comfortable in the game continuation. White just exchanged off on e7 and now just takes on d5. So is this a problem? If ED, do we not have just knight takes d5? There's no nasty check or anything. Is that actually possible? In which case, black's playing knight takes c3, is moving a piece more than once in the opening, so rule breaking. Is that so significant? Well, it's easy for white to play. I think this position is nice pressure on black, very solid position now for Vasily Ivanchuk to play, and hopefully not to get into too much time pressure like in other games, which he's lost on time literally in this tournament. So this position is very solid for Vasily Ivanchuk to have against Radjabov, the number 4 in the world Radjabov at the moment. So knight d7 after castles, knight f6. Rook fc1, white's just preparing gradually c4. Plays that now. This is taken, queen takes c4. Okay, now h3. Queen c5. So there's nagging queenside pressure that Vasily has in this position. Must have been very happy now. So bishop d5. So we get some manoeuvring. Bishop f3. Bishops come off. So a fairly simple position for white to play and exert pressure. This c6 point in particular, if it can be undermined later, or just generally provoke black to play a weakening of the dark squares to get a knight to c5, will be quite tasty positioning. f6, slight weakening over there. As black's pawn structure gets fixed on both sides. Probing move queen a5, rather suave. Probing and creating more weaknesses on the queen side. Now there's a lovely entrenched knight on c5. Okay, nice manoeuvring. Nice positional grind here from Vasily. And exchanging off queens. In this position, actually a critical moment. Exchanging off queens is the way to go here, using that pin on the king. What can black do? He'll be in big trouble if rook e6, knight c5 for example. So queen's coming off by force, leaving black with just a counterplay-less position, it seems. Although g4, okay, it seems that in theory at least, black might try and do something on the h file with h5 later. Okay, so now h5 here, knight e4. Is black getting a sniff of counterplay? Not really. e4, it seems white's really got control of the position. Rook d5 doesn't really do that much, even though it looks interesting. So this rook and pawn ending now is still easy to play for Vasily. He's going for this h file now after rook b1. h7 is protected. Now the rooks can potentially double, and in fact here they double, so it's white using the h file, and this e5 rate's quite nasty. It's a rook g5. So here white ended up using the h file and forcibly getting off a pair of rooks, and now this ending is kind of miserable for black. Check. So we've got 3 connected pass pawns potentially against black's 2 over there, which are not connected. Check, check. Now e6 is a bit of a menace. It's used here. f5. So e7's on the cards now. Rook f8. And here now we see the move f6, which is rather cruel, because it cuts off the king from e7. If rook takes, then check, and then f7. If we try and take the pawn with the rook, we have check, and I think just f7 is crushing. There's no defense to that. So that's pretty unfortunate. If we take with the king, we just lose the rook to check. So unfortunately for, well, this is the end. f6 is a winning move here. But let's go back and check the game more generally. I think white just had a nagging edge for a long while after knight e4. Maybe just castling here, or it's interesting. But after knight e4, it seemed black was on the back foot here. So if ed, the problem is actually knight takes d5 is possible. So and Nigel Short was indicating maybe just knight e4 was actually a mistake. It was in the wrong position. It was just not right to play knight e4 here. White's just taking, and then after cd, getting a very comfortable position. Black having to move the piece again to take on c3, so white's got a ready-made kind of plans here on the queen side to strike later with c4 to intensify the queen side pressure. Very nice grip on the e5 square, very comfortable. Wanting the exchange of queens there. Okay, not for the moment. Queen a3 is quite annoying. Knight e5. White has to worry about king safety in this position, even though he's got the pressure on the queen side. He's got to worry a bit about his king. So bishop f3 gets rid of that attacking bishop. Otherwise, black might have started to evolve some cheap threats like queen g5, for example. So it's a good moment to try and get rid of this this bishop. And now it's safer for white's king a little bit. And again, we're kind of back to this kind of simple looking position where white's got this solid advantage. He's probing now on the queen side. You see that evaluation is solid all the way through at the moment. It's a solid plus for white. Now rook here, queen b3 is a very practical move from a human point of view, just simplifying, still maintaining advantage even if there's an evaluation drop from the engineering point of view. Getting rid of the queens makes things less complicated. So has white got enough pressure to make this a win? Exchange of knights here. Should this have actually been losing for black? Interestingly, you know, it doesn't seem such a big deal at the moment, but it's easier for white to play surely because, well, he's got potential breaks on the cards. Black now could have sealed up the king side actually with h4, and as we saw from the evidence of the game, it's white that took over the h file here. Maybe h4 and black shouldn't lose actually. If h4 would be slightly different scenario. Maybe this is a game which black shouldn't have lost. It seems hg. How did white end up getting the rooks over there? Well, here it starts to be tricky. White's got this flexibility here to either double all the time if d4 is guarded by the king, sometimes if the rooks are not always looking at d4, or switch both rooks to h2. So there's versatility of the rooks here, and the king's ideally positioned guarding that d4 pawn. And we see the rook transfer now. So maybe, you know, black should have sealed up the king side, because now there's this opportunity for white to start doubling on the h file soon. In this position, e5 is powerful now after rook d7. Was it actually a technical blunder? If this had gone there instead, again, you know, white can even sack the d pawn here and potentially get something now. Apparently not there. That's like loads of checks. But this kind of position could be unpleasant. Okay, but in the game, yeah, it just seems to be more punishing than that. It seems to be very punishing with e5 in this position. And here, this is now a big advantage for white. White's got a big advantage out of this, which is great for Vasily Ivanchuk fans like myself to see him winning after some horrible time-related losses. So he's in the driving seat now in this rook and pawn ending. If c takes d4, I don't think that helps. King e4 takes, check. This looks not too hot for black either. Okay, so in the game we saw rook takes d4, check, rook g7. White's in the driving seat here in this rook and pawn ending. Three connected passed pawns, check, and now this is really getting to be crushing proportions with this e6 and f5. So here now, final crushing move, f6. This is all winning now for white. So great for Vasily there. So I was very lucky to go and see a round which had decisive games in it. Very, very exciting round to go and watch live. You don't need to book tickets in advance. You can just go there, especially during the week. I'd recommend going at least once if you're in London. I'd recommend it, and it's brilliant commentators. Grandmaster Nigel Short and I am Lawrence Trent, who's probably soon to be a GM. He's got all the potential, and they're brilliant commentators. Very fun commentary, very relaxed in the commentary room in particular. I'd recommend it. So yeah, really enjoyed that day, but it really took it out of me the next day. I couldn't do this video yesterday, but brilliant fun. And yeah, the game content has really, of these games, much more interesting than I thought the first round might imply. It's really been bloodthirsty rounds, especially this King's Indian defence in this round. Of course I love the King's Indian defence. I like the stone wall of the Netherlands Iranians transposed stone wall. You know, the openings are of great interest here as well, for me on a personal level, and maybe to some of you. So thanks very much. Comments or questions on YouTube.